Wednesday Addams is not exactly the type of client you would expect to see in therapy, but season 2 of Netflix Wednesday dives into psychology in some pretty surprising ways. From psychiatric hospitals to complicated mother-daughter dynamics to the invisible child finally being seen. As a therapist, I couldn't help but notice how much of this show actually reflects real therapy themes. So today, I'm trying something new. I'm doing a Therapist Reacts to Wednesday Season 2. Let's dive in. Hi everybody, I'm Sam and I'm an Australian online-based counsellor for introverts, gentle souls, those who are recovering from trauma. Now, if you have been watching my channel for a while, you would know I mainly talk about the INFJ, Myer Briggs personality. So if that is you, stick around because I'm sure there's quite a few INFJ themes in what I'm going to talk about with my reaction to Wednesday. I love Wednesday. I've always loved the Addams Family. When I was a kid, I used to love watching the old episodes that I think were filmed in the 60s. So even as a kid, they were quite old. I loved the comics, the cartoons. My inner child, who was very much an emo and in the punk rock scene and a little bit of goth, just loves Wednesday. So this was a super fun show to watch. But as always, as a therapist, I often see themes and it makes me just want to talk about it and get into the meaty stuff with you. So there are 4 things that I want to talk about. And the first one is the importance of lived experience. So Wednesday in episode 2, she goes to the Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital. And while she was there, she was talking to the executive assistant to the psychiatric doctor, Judy. So Judy was the assistant to Dr. Fairburn, and Dr. Fairburn is the head of psychiatry of this psychiatric hospital for outcasts. And they're talking about the book that Dr. Fairburn has written. And Wednesday asks Judy, is she an outcast? And Judy says, why? Doesn't matter. And Wednesday, in all her dry wit, says, it's like a vegetarian writing a book on cannibalism. Now, this is such a powerful metaphor for therapy and the therapy space that we are currently in. You can study all the theory in the world, but without lived experience, whether that's lived experience of having autism or going through trauma or postpartum depression, whatever it is, without the lived experience, sometimes you can miss the heart of it. Now, I'm not saying that a professional can't help somebody who's going through something that they haven't been through. But I feel like as clients, so I've been on the receiving end of therapy as well, as a client, you can pick up on the energy of the therapist on if they actually truly get it and if they have the lived experience of it. I've noticed in the community services field in Australia and I believe the UK, other countries, you have to tell me if this is true, but there are now jobs that people can apply for where they're peer like therapeutic support workers. So those who might go into like a mental health center, for example, and be more of a peer support for clients and patients as somebody who's had the lived experience. I know for me as a survivor of trauma, it was really important for me to find a therapist who was also a survivor of trauma because there is so much shame around trauma that it can often be very hard to talk about it with someone who doesn't get it. And I know for me, the last thing I wanted was sympathy or people going, oh, I'm so sorry. But when someone has actually had the lived experience of that, they embrace you in a different way. Now, that theme of you don't get it unless you've lived it carries straight into Wednesday's relationship with her family. So the second thing that I want to talk about that came up for me while watching season 2 of Wednesday was the mother wound. The mother wound between Wednesday, her mum Morticia, and her grandma Hester. Now, the mother wound happens when you might get all your physical needs met by your mum, so you're fed, you're bathed, you're looked after in that way, but you aren't given the emotional love that you need. You're not nurtured. Your attachment needs aren't being met. There's no secure attachment. And it quite often happens, the mother wound happens when your mum might be more narcissistic, just thinking about themselves. And we can see in this show that Hester is the classic narcissist. Like that just classic narcissist. And you can see that Morticia was raised in a way where she did not get that love and that nurturing that every child needs. And I could see how Morticia was trying to parent in a way that she didn't get. And that in a way was pushing Wednesday away, which, you know, like Morticia was trying so hard to connect with Wednesday and Wednesday just did not want it. But I feel like early on in the season, Wednesday just didn't understand where Morticia was coming from. She couldn't see the dynamics between Morticia and her grandma Hester. I thought it was interesting how Morticia shared with Wednesday how Hester dismissed Morticia's book, and how she was just overly critical rather than being supportive and encouraging as a mother should be. She was dismissive. She made Morticia feel like crap, so much so that Morticia had to hide the fact that she, I'm guessing, was a famous author. And then later on, Wednesday received that same criticism about her book from Hester, and I could see in Wednesday's face expression that it was like a light bulb moment and of understanding of what her mum had to put up with her grandma. And in a way, I think it softened Wednesday to be more open and accepting of her mother. You can see the generational trauma that this causes. So often with generational trauma, the grandparent can parent in one way, and then that next lot of parents, they're like, I'm not going to parent like that, but they still screw up in whatever way. They try their best, but they're still parenting out of trauma. And then the younger generation, which I would say is my generation right now as a parent, we have become the cycle breakers. We have become the ones where we really, really don't want to repeat the cycle anymore, and we want to parent our children in a way that is nurturing and is loving and accepting and fully embracing of who our children are. And while we're talking about cycles, one of the most fascinating therapy themes for me was how the show handles parts of ourselves. And that leads us to Thing. I love Thing. I just love how they can make an animated hand be so loved and so adorable and so caring. And you can see that Thing, if Thing has a heart full of love and care for Wednesday and for the Addams family. And I really enjoyed watching the group therapy episode where Thing attends this group therapy for all different parts. So yeah, there was a head and there was ears and there was an eyeballs, and what else was there? There was a leg, all these different parts that are turning up to therapy. And then at the very end, the last episode, we discover that Thing, the hand, actually belongs to Isaac, aka the zombie, also known as Slurp. And Isaac turns out to be the baddie of the season. What really spoke to me was, or probably more like internal family systems. So internal family systems is a therapeutic approach that I personally use. So I'm an informed internal family systems therapist. And essentially it's about how we are made up of all different parts. We all have protective parts, wounded parts, playful parts, And none of them are bad. All of our parts have a positive intention for our life. They are trying to help us in whatever way. Some parts are young, some are older, and these parts can get stuck in those younger ages. But what I loved was, there was a quote, I could not find the quote on Google, so I'm not going to say it word for word, but Wednesday, when she recognized that thing belonged to Isaac, or was originally Isaac's hand, she said something about how it just shows that all the good went into that part. That basically not all parts are bad. And yeah, it just really highlighted internal family systems to me, and just how we really are. We're made up of all different parts, and how beautiful is that? Now, speaking of parts, what about the parts of us that don't get seen at all? Enter Agnes, my new favorite character. This is about the invisible child and embracing yourself. So Agnes, her power is invisibility, but not only is her power invisibility, we later see in season 2 that her role within her own family is also as the invisible child. Now, in many families, especially ones where the parents are absent and neglectful, in many families there's the golden child, the scapegoat, and the invisible child. And the invisible child often gets forgotten about. And you can see her play out that part, that role that she's always had in the school. She's struggling to make friends. She desperately wants Wednesday to love her. She does everything she can to be like Wednesday. She dresses like Wednesday. She tries to act like Wednesday. But I feel like towards the end of season 2, we saw real growth with Agnes. And there was a moment when Enid confronts Agnes and tells her to stop trying to be like everybody else. Stop trying, you're always going to be invisible while you're trying to be someone else, and to just embrace who you are. Be you. Now, I'm completely paraphrasing on what she actually said, but what I got out of that was just be you. And when you are yourself, that's when you will shine. That's when you will come out of your shell. That's when you will find yourself. And you can see that in Agnes. Now, her clothes at the end were just amazing. I was obsessed with them. But it was just a symbolism of Agnes stepping out, embracing her power, stepping into the light. I loved the dance that Enid and Agnes did. I just thought that was absolutely stunning, and just that whole arc of Agnes was just beautiful. I saw a lot of myself in Agnes. I always felt like the invisible person, the person that never gets seen. Growing up, I desperately wanted to fit in, and even though there was parts of me that embraced my uniqueness and dressed how I wanted to dress and be as strange as I wanted to be, there was other parts of me that tried to be like other people, to try and be cool like them, because I just really wanted to fit in. But as soon as I stopped embracing that part and stopped trying to be someone I wasn't, that's where I truly found myself. And as I truly found myself, that's when I found healing, and that's when I was able to step into my purpose and step into joy and step into a new level of confidence, which is something that you can see in Agnes at the very end. So whether you're a Matisha trying to break the cycle, and Agnes learning to step out of invisibility, or just someone who's always felt like an outcast, Wednesday shows us that healing is about more than fixing what's broken. It's about embracing every part of who we are. If you liked this breakdown, let me know. Should I do more Therapist Reacts videos? Because honestly, there are so many more shows that we could unpack together. I love watching TV. It's what I do in my downtime, and I love psychoanalyzing characters. So yeah, subscribe, like, write me a comment. Bye!